Hey everybody, well, maybe you should bring us in.
You want me to bring us in?
Yeah, bring us in.
Alrighty, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us for episode 8, I believe, of Bill and Matt Are Losing It. I'm Bill.
And I'm Matt.
If you don't know the difference, then welcome to the show.
There really isn't much difference.
No, there really isn't. Hey, Bill, how was your week?
My week was pretty good.
Good?
Yeah, I had a great week.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Great.
Nothing exciting, nothing noteworthy. I don't really have anything to share.
Nothing.
But that's a good week sometimes.
Nothing to share. That's good.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
This podcast is going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a pretty, I don't know. I think every week I'm like, it was good and it was bad. It was a mixed week. So, again, I had a mixed week, just like every week. So, Next week I'll tell you how my week was mixed.
It's complicated, like your personality.
It is complicated, like my personality. What's complicated about my personality?
Nothing.
Thanks, Bill.
No, you're simple.
I am. I'm a simple man. So,
well, everybody, we have a special episode for you today.
Actually, an actual special episode.
Yes. When we told you we had a surprise next week, it turns out we have a surprise for you this week. We have our good friend and awesome fit dude, Chip Copeland.
Oh,
Yay,
thank
Chip.
you. Thank you. I don't know how fit I am.
Compared to us, you're a god.
I'm no Adonis at all.
Compared to us, I would say you might be.
Well, so you guys are at the beginning of a journey. You're, and this is the first steps, right?
Yeah.
You've just taken your first steps into a much larger world, so to speak.
Yeah.
So.
And after the first couple steps, we have to rest because we're out of shape.
Take a minute. Take a knee. Take a knee.
Yeah. I mean, I'm almost envious of you guys, like where you're at. Like I was thinking about it. Like,
we can show you how to get here.
Yeah.
That's no problem.
I know completely how to get there. Trust me. It's a bit pint of Ben and Jerry's every single night, and
that helps, yes.
a lot of sitting on my. Can I cuss? I'm sorry.
We try to keep it PG-13, but I think is okay.
Okay.
I'll bleep you.
If you start saying jerk, then we might have to start bleeping you.
I'll bleep that too.
All right. Okay. I'll try and keep it. But yeah, like I'm almost envious because when I started like kind of looking at like re-examining, like, thinking back to like where I started with stuff, it's kind of like thinking about it, I was like, man, there's so many things that I could go back and if I know what I know now,
oh yeah,
I would start differently, and like really kind of, because one of the things that I'm really kind of interested in is tracking and like keeping track of the numbers. I'm not like, down to the minute detail, but I really would like to know like my overall BMI, my body mass index, which is like, where I started, what my muscle to fat ratio was when I first started, because all I can really go by is like, the weight on the scale then to now, which is, it's an inaccurate representation of where my body is now compared to what it was then.
Yeah, because it doesn't take into account the mass of your muscles.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just overall, and you can kind of like, figure out, based on your weight and your height, you can kind of, what your lean mass to like, fat ratio is. There's some, calculators out there, but like nothing beats like actually getting, even like calipers or something like that, where they pinch off
right.
your arm and they can, kind of do that. Did you see that?
I did. That was nice.
Way to show off your muscles, jerk.
This is that.
For everybody at home who couldn't see that, he lifted his arm up to pinch his underskin,
or lack thereof,
and then just flexed in front of us because he's a jerk. It's pretty awesome when I do it too. Skin's pretty tight on the back, mostly because it's so fat around the whole rest of the circumference.
Mine looks like I got some pizza dough hanging from the bottom of my arm.
Nice.
For visual for y'all.
What was upsetting is my first thought was like, well, scrape some off and then we'll make some pizza. That sounds delicious.
Welcome to the mind of a fat person.
I work at a pizza place part time, so
how do you not indulge?
Well, we have an excellent gluten-free crust that occasionally I will partake in, but we also have some. It's more of an Italian eatery, so there's like some great like salad. We got really good like salad with like arugula, and it's got eggs and bacon and beans and avocado, and I'll throw some. But that's getting into really
I was gonna say let's
like well. So get back to I wish I would have started like having like some science behind like that initial thing, because I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes back in like 2009.
Wow.
And leading up to that, like I was at my heaviest in 2000. No, wait a second. I was diagnosed in 2008. I'm sorry. I went to Ireland with my family in 2007, and that's really like that trip really kind of like I was at my heaviest. I was about, let's just say I was in between 290 and 300 pounds. I was at that point, I was probably about where Matt is. Matt and I are about the same height.
Yeah.
So, it was like I was feeling like really weird. Like, it was just towards the end of the trip, there was something that was just off with my body. I didn't know what it was, but I was like feeling fatigue. I was very thirsty. Came back to home, and over the next, it was really kind of weird because over the next 6 months, I started losing weight. I actually was like I was like losing weight, and I'm like, man, what am I doing? I'm not exercising. I'm eating a bunch of chocolate. Not even trying. I'm losing weight. My pants. I gotta get new pants. But then I also like started having like once again, I was constantly thirsty. I was constantly having to urinate.
Right.
And if you know anything about type 2 diabetes or metabolic syndrome, that's pretty much a sure sign. There were some other things, like I was waking up in the middle of the night, like a fever of over 100. And then I wake up in the morning and I was like sweating horribly. But I wake up the next morning and I was fine. I wasn't running a fever. And so I went to the doctor and I was like, man, I don't know what's going on. And he's like, well, let's run some tests. And I have an idea. It's either you're, type 2 diabetic or you've got syphilis.
That's one of the few times you're hoping for syphilis.
Yeah. So, they ran some blood tests. I came back, did a simple, glucometer, just checked my blood sugar. It was, so like a normal person's blood sugar is going to be in between 70 and 120. And by most standards nowadays, the quote unquote average would be in a healthy range. If you're like over 120, they consider you type diabetic. But actually, maybe it should be less than that. But at any rate, so mine was over 600.
Oh my God.
Mercy.
Yeah. So he immediately was like, well, usually when somebody's in this kind of situation, we throw them in the hospital and we monitor them that way. And I was like, I can't afford a hospital stay. So he was like, well, we'll do it outpatient. And he hooked me up with some insulin, which, for a quick fix that works to down regulate. But that's just because, when we're talking about this stuff, this is my own personal experience. Okay, I'm not a physician. I'm not a dietitian. I have I have my own, like personal experience that I'm basing a lot of this stuff off of. So it's, I would recommend that, people who may be listening to this and thinking, oh, well, I should, try this, find, either your GP, hopefully they're a decent general practitioner, or a good functional medicine doctor, find somebody that can, at least guide you in the right way towards this kind of stuff. Just don't, haphazardly, blindly go into it just based off of what, I say, because, my ideas are not original. I'm not coming up with, I'm not like making, this isn't like revolutionary, and a lot of the things that I've learned, I've gotten from a lot of different pieces, a lot of different places, So, I'm not giving out advice.
We should make that disclaimer ourselves a little more often.
Why?
Because we're certainly not experts. We don't even know as much as most people do.
I think we've given that disclaimer
once. I think on our first episode we may have given that disclaimer.
And then I think the disclaimer's been pretty self-evident.
Right.
But sure, we can specifically state it just in case someone's listening to us like, man, these guys are really smart. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anybody's thinking that. But just
if there is someone, then we probably should be really clear with them.
They're probably impressionable to begin with. Yeah. We should let them know.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying because, like, when you start talking about this kind of stuff, sometimes I think that like people, they just get, there's certain people that can actually give out, prescribe treatments, and there's by law people who can, and there's people who. Sorry if you hear that. That's my dog. There's people that can. There's people that can't, and so this is like largely for entertainment purposes, but
largely.
also
it's about 100% entertainment purposes.
But hopefully, if you hear anything that like you might think, learn, educate yourself, learn, ask questions. Anyway, so like getting back to like the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, they put me on so I went from like being like 290 pounds to 300 pounds because your weight will fluctuate based on how much water you've had, when was the last time you pooped, eat, when was the last time you ate, that kind of thing. So that I kind of use that. You can fluctuate up to 10 pounds in any given moment. But so I went from that, though, down to, at my lowest in this unhealthy way, 217 pounds. Okay.
Wow.
This was, I lost weight, but I didn't do it the way, like, since I was so insulin insensitive, my body was burning fat because it could not process carbohydrates at all. It was, blood sugar was just crazy. It was not, my body was not responsive to insulin that my body would produce.
So you were like super diabetic.
Yeah, I was really bad off. And so that's, I don't know why the insulin that they gave me helped regulate that, but, from there, they put me on metformin, which is a common diabetes drug.
Right.
That they'll put like type 2 diabetics on. Type 1 and type 2 are two different things. Type 1 is something that's genetic, that
but since childhood.
Right, yeah, or you could develop it into if possibly you could develop into type 1, but type 2 is more of like they used to call it early onset or adult onset diabetes is what they would call it.
It's also now called the sugars in the South.
The shit. I'm not aware of that.
You got the sugar, baby.
Look, man, the problem is that everyone's drinking sweet tea down there.
Oh my God, yes.
Hey. I love sweet tea.
Yeah, I remember. So yeah, like, but that's not where my this started. Even though I was diagnosed, I went many years of being a very bad diabetic, where I would be on my medication, and then I would go off the medication, and then I would I wasn't really watching my diet. I was largely ignoring the advice that I had been given. And so I was a very bad diabetic for many years, and there was kind of a point at which back in 2014, 2015, where some personal things kind of came to a head in my life, where I was examining my body, and also I was just looking at a lot of things that were happening in my life, and I was like, there's some things that are off here. And so I was looking at maybe one of the ways that I could fix some of these things were work on myself, and fix these health issues. So a couple of things that stood out was I got I had to pay like $700 for a freaking blood test, just to tell me, hey, you're messed up. And something that I already knew. It was like, here's a bill for $700, right. And I had insurance at the time, which was weird because when I didn't have insurance, it only cost me $26. So I was like, F this, man. So there was that, and then also my testosterone from this was in the. Sorry, you're gonna have to edit that. I apologize.
Where was your testosterone, Chip?
It was there. And a lot of times, and I've heard this like a few times. A lot of a lot of men, they start making changes when they have problems with when they have erectile dysfunction, essentially. And that's what, to be completely honest with you, that's what happened with me. I, kind of funny story. I was making out with a girl one time, and let's just say I was there, but parts of me weren't.
And that's the motivation right there. That'll start making you changes in your life.
Oh, for sure.
It was, but looking at that, just that in particular is also a side effect, a negative side effect from being a diabetic, a type 2 diabetic. You can have issues with that. It's just like emotionally, I was just like, man, there were so many things going on where I was just like, things that wouldn't. It's okay. Steven Spielberg is really good at pulling at those heartstrings when you're watching the movie and stuff like that, But, when you're sitting there and you're watching, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Terminator 2 and you're crying at this pivotal scene, I'm like, what is wrong with me?
This AT&T commercial is so moving.
Exactly. So some of the advice that I was getting from dietitians and the doctors, they pretty much give you eat better, eat better, move more. Mm-hmm. They lack the Western medicine is great for acute problems.
Right,
okay,
right.
If I break my arm, I'm going to go to a freaking emergency room, and they're going to take really good care of that specific problem. With chronic degenerative diseases, Western medicine is kind of, they don't. The majority of the physicians out there, they're, and this is where I'm getting kind of into this thing where this is my personal opinion. Most physicians only have about less than 36 hours of nutrition training.
Wow.
In their entire medical medical education, and a lot of times they don't. A lot of times the doctors that do learn about this kind of stuff, they do it on their own time after their education, and a good doctor will continually educate themselves and keep up with the modern research. But a lot of times a lot of doctors, they just kind of take what's there, and they've been trained to well, there's a medication that you can prescribe for this. There's a medication that you can do for this. Medication you can do for this. And next thing you know, you're on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of medications, And the problem is that, there's, studies, they don't control for studies in which people are taking all these different medications. So then all of a sudden, somebody's like, oh crap, it's like I'm screwed up really bad and I got medical bills out the yin yang. And, I just was looking at this and I was like, I don't want to go down this road. And then I was looking at the American Diabetes Association. They say you can, you got to increase your fiber intake and that you need to do X, Y, or Z. Sorry, those aren't specific things.
You do have to do X, Y, and Z sometimes.
Right, exactly. So, but one of the recommendations is like, the dietitian was like telling me in person, it's like, hey, with every meal you can have up to 50 carbohydrates. Well, part of insulin insensitivity or insulin resistance, insulin resistance is that, you cannot process carbohydrates. That is just your body, is just not capable of doing it at that point. So if I'm sitting down at a meal and I'm like, oh, I can have up to 50 carbohydrates, it's, and they also say you need fiber and stuff like that. Well, a lot of times people just generally go, okay, I can have carbohydrates, I can have fiber, and they think grains,
right,
pastas, that's the stuff they're thinking of when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I was just, just digging around and all these things were kind of rolling around in my head, and I was like, I went to Dr. Google, I guess.
He's my best doctor.
Yeah. How to reverse type 2 diabetes naturally is all I typed in. And I came across some stuff and I stumbled across the paleo diet. And nowadays it's the funny thing is that like nowadays the paleo diet is very in vogue,
Right.
And it's brilliant marketing, but really when really paleo just means eat real food.
Right.
When I say real food, it's like, you're cutting out your processed foods, you're cutting out your sugars, you're cutting out, the grains, grains, pastas, bread, that sort of thing. And so from there, I was just kind of like, okay, I mean, like, I realized that, like, you kind of, some people, they try and jump, and I've done it. I did it before in the past too. It's like you jump wholeheartedly into like this thing.
Right.
I'm gonna eat right. I'm gonna, exercise my ass off, and I'm gonna like, get on the treadmill. I'm gonna really, get in shape and everything. But I found that failed me. That mentality failed me. The whole, I guess the New Year's resolution mentality.
Right.
And what I found that the thing that helped me succeed was taking small steps, moving those big. It's like a snowball, rolling down a hill. It starts out small, and then as it's rolling down the hill, it's picking up steam, and then it gets bigger, and bigger.
Right.
I think, Chip. You've been listening to the podcast, right, so far?
Yeah.
So you're aware that Bill and I are taking very small steps into our
So
and anybody tuning in expecting some crazy weight loss change, maybe not getting it here. I don't know.
No, I think that aspect that you're taking on it is probably the best thing to do for lasting health. And wellness is to take those small steps and start moving those small rocks out of the way first. One of the things that I did was the first thing I did. Yeah, I found the paleo thing, and at first I was like, oh, this seems like this is really good, But at first the only thing that I got was no bread, no pasta. Okay, so like that was the first thing, and I eliminated no bread, no pasta. I still stuck with rice for a while, but
are you off rice now? Why are you a rice hater?
It's on again, off again. It's like Rachel and Ross. I mean, what's going on?
No, but seriously, are you eating rice right now?
Okay. The first book that I got on the paleo diet was called The Paleo Solution by an author named Rob Wolf.
Cool.
He's like one of the forebearers of the whole concept of the paleo diet. He like early on, he's been a pretty big proponent. And yeah, he recently came out with a book called Wired to Eat, which is really kind of it's fascinating because he one of the things is like he's focusing on is like there's a concept of, and you're going to hear more and more about it, is like personalized nutrition.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he does in his book is there's a 7-day carb test where you pretty much introduced certain carb with a glucometer. You check your blood sugar, pre and post, eating like 70 grams, or I can't remember I think it's 70 grams effective carbohydrates of, specific types of carbohydrates. And one of them would be rice. Well, I've been reintroducing some healthy carbohydrates like sweet potatoes and quinoa and whatnot. And rice was on the list as well because I'm doing more glycolytically active exercise now, like weight training, and I ride my bike and stuff like that.
You can't throw a big word out there like that and not have to explain it.
What do you mean?
Glycolytic
exercise. So
what's that?
So these exercises designed around glucose absorption.
When your muscles store glycogen,
yes,
which can be depleted when you're lifting weights or any type of strenuous physical activity. Your muscle is going to deplete those glycogen stores. So it's like the whole thing about you've heard about runners that need to carb up or something like that before they go exercise. Well, it's kind of it's not necessarily the case that these days that always holds true with exercise. But anyway, so the stuff that's glycolytically demanding, where it will exhaust those glycogen stores in your muscle. If you're really active, like a professional athlete or something like that, then after you do like an intense training, yes, you need to replenish those stores, especially if you have to do some training later on in the day. And you've probably heard of when you've heard of people talk about like the feeding window, in which after exercise, you got to get in some, protein, or you got to do this or that.
We have feeding windows, but they're for different things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
There's a McDonald's feeding window and a Chick-fil-A feeding window.
It's the a lot of the science, the sports nutrition science has been based around endurance exercise, because somebody in the lab was like, oh, we could put a treadmill in here, and then we can have somebody run, and then we can biopsy their muscle and see how much glycogen repletion or whatever. This is another thing where I'm just like, I'm not a professional dietitian, or scientist. I can't. I'm giving broad overviews or broad brushstrokes here.
Sure.
It's like it's just like so when I'm doing that kind of exercise, I do need to have a little bit more carbohydrate. Like I've had to increase my carbohydrates because I went really low carbohydrate. I was doing 150 grams or carbohydrates less a day. That was like one thing that I decided on doing when I cut out like grains and breads and pastas and processed food and sugar.
So you are eating rice.
No. Okay.
Now you are, right?
Now based on the 7-day carb test, the thing is that so the other day, before I ate some rice, I tested my blood glucose, and I was sitting around like 98, right?
Yeah.
30 minutes later, after I had this meal that I made, it was like white rice with some broccoli and some sweet peppers with I just made some lunch. I tested my glucose like 30 minutes later, and it was 179.
Wow.
Okay, so whenever you have a meal, your glucose is going to spike. That's but it shouldn't. Pretty much that's saying based on this model of personalized nutrition, maybe rice is not necessarily the best thing that I should consume when it comes to if I'm trying to keep my insulin from being, spiked, essentially.
Well, let me ask you this: what should your blood sugar be 30 minutes after you eat a meal?
Well, if I can only speak to what mine
Your
should be.
Right.
My own personal experience. If I have a heavy, carbohydrate meal, then it's that my blood glucose hits, it goes up pretty high. But now this is like one, with one thing about me is that I've regulated my body back to where I'm much more insulin sensitive. Mm-hmm. And so even though it used to be if I had a meal like that back when I was really unhealthy, I was always consistently, within a blood glucose range of 170 to 270.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was at the beginning of 2015 before I really started, really getting serious about it. And so I would, because I was monitoring myself and I was like, this is just not good, because elevated levels like that, it's just, sugar is when we say sugar, we're talking carbohydrates.
Excessive sugar is toxic.
Yes, excessive sugar is toxic. It's not good for your brain. It's not good for longevity. It's not good for excessive, constantly in this overfed state. It leads to chronic degenerative disease, and
right.
And that's what were you gonna say, Matt?
Yeah, Chip. So when you went completely off carbs or whatever what your diet was, you weren't eating rice, you weren't eating pasta, you weren't eating bread. Obviously, you weren't having sugar. What were you eating? You said you weren't even eating sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. That's crazy. That's crazy. But I mean, I get it. Those. I mean, a sweet potato is a high carb. I assume you're probably not eating brown russet potatoes either, right?
These days, I'm incorporating that stuff more often. It's not as much of a glycemic load,
right?
I guess, and you can do certain things like, well, when getting back to the question though, is what was I eating? The funny thing is, in the past episode that I listened to when Bill was talking about the Atkins diet, the funny thing is that I was listening to it and he was like, yeah, I lost the most amount of weight on the Atkins diet, but it made me feel like crap. You went low carb. You were in a low carbohydrate diet, and the Atkins diet is actually that's really kind of where that whole thing. And for a lot of people started when they first heard about low carbohydrates was the Atkins diet in the early 90s. I remember when you were doing it.
Yeah.
And the funny thing that I've learned since, or within the last few years, is that you were kind of right on track. The only thing that you were missing was the fermentable vegetable fibers in your gut to counterbalance. You weren't pairing fiber with fat.
Oh, no,
so you're probably, if you I can put, make a bulletproof coffee, put some coconut oil and some butter in my coffee or whatever. But if I have too much of that, it's going to give me disaster pants. So,
I like that.
You can't have too much, you can't have too much of it. Otherwise you're going to have some abdominal stress.
Right.
But if you are, as long as you don't have problems with SIBO, a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or any type of other, irritable bowel syndrome type stuff, then you can, everybody should have more plant fiber in their diet.
I agree.
And so, but the Atkins diet is actually not far off from paleo diet. And when, once again, paleo diet, just whole food. I mean, also another thing is that you have to consider is that the quality of the calories or the fats or the meats that you were taking in probably weren't the best.
Well, I was working at Waffle House at the time, so that can...
Right, I know. So it's it's a lot of, and that's I don't want to get into well, okay, we're gonna get into it. Like, the whole vegan thing, and vegetarian. First off, I have vegan days. I have vegetarian days. 80% of my plate, if you look at my daily diet, is vegetable.
I like
based.
that.
That's good.
And that's like I'm constantly eating vegetables, and one of the easiest ways is like a frittata, or like just like a scrambler, essentially, with like a bunch of different vegetables. Throw it in there with some salt, pepper, cumin, and crack a couple eggs in there. Throw some avocado on top. There you go, and I'm just like good to go for a while. And but yeah, like, the whole vegan and vegetarian thing, I think that a lot of people who go on those diets, they feel really good because they're becoming more conscious of what they eat.
Mm-hmm.
They're eating more plants,
Yes.
Which is good for everybody. And so they're just getting way more benefit because they're also cutting out the processed crap. But you can be a crapitarian too.
Oh yes, you can.
Go vegetarian or vegan.
I can prove that to you.
I can demonstrate that for you.
I can have scientists stand around and watch me do this. They'll see exactly how you can eat rubbish and stay vegan.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about the vegetarian hot dogs. The problem is that
Those are awful.
man,
I still eat them. They're disgusting. Like,
don't eat them. They're
no, I know.
Way more heavily processed than even a lot of like real beef products are out there. So
absolutely, no. When I eat them, I feel bloated, and it's all the same. I don't get the intestinal issues that I have when I eat meat or dairy or something, but when I eat those, I feel really bloated everywhere else in my body. Like, it's not good what it does to you. They're not healthy.
Yeah,
they're not meat, but they are not healthy. Those are rubbish.
Yeah, no. Well, and the thing is, though, is that's the problem, is that a lot of people, they go vegan or vegetarian, but then they're incorporating a lot of hydrogenated oils, like vegetable oils, into which are toxic.
Yep.
Because it becomes trans fat so easily, and you're also removing antioxidants from these oils through the processing, and you're increasing the level of free radicals in those oils. And those oils, create oxidation within your cells, which is bad for, is bad.
Well, I think we talked a little bit about this in a recent episode about how oils may not be the best for you. Are you currently eating oils, or do you stay away from oil in general?
I use coconut oil, grass-fed butter, and olive oil.
Okay.
And avocado oil. I have not messed around with macadamia nut oil or almond oil because they tend to be a little bit more pricey.
Right. Since you've been limiting what types of oils you eat, have you noticed any change in your health, or any noticeable change at all for you?
It's hard to see. That's another thing, is like, when I used to use margarine,
Right.
when I went and bought butter, I bought margarine like a lot of people do, but that's not butter.
Right.
It's vegetable oil.
Yeah.
And when you heat it, it becomes a trans fat.
Yeah.
They like to say, oh, no trans fats, or no saturated fat. It's like the whole demonization of saturated fat ever since, ever since the 60s.
Right.
It's like I used to use that, but then I went to I started using the coconut. I think I felt better, for sure. I mean, I feel a lot better now that I don't. I mean, but it's hard to say because I don't consume any of those oils now.
Right.
So I can't really, if I, like, tomorrow I could go get some, instead of putting, grass-fed butter in my coffee, I'll go get some margarine or something, and I can try that for a week and see how it makes me feel.
I would not do that.
No, it's not worth it.
Like,
Right.
the problem, I think the problem there would be that you wouldn't feel a change. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the times the damage these things are doing to you, you don't notice it. you don't feel it the day you ate it.
It's death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's the slow progress of what you're doing to yourself slowly. So yeah, I was just curious to see if you would actually feel it. I mean, I know there's I can't imagine you don't have a benefit from the decisions you've made.
I mean, a healthy, most of our cells, are, there's fat. It's fat, and if you give your body, toxic fats, it's going to use. Your body is not dumb; it's smart, and it's going to use what you give it to replenish what it can. And if you give yourself bad toxic fats in the form of vegetable, like, we're talking like, cottonseed oil, canola oil, all those heavily processed, soybean oil, all those heavily processed vegetable oils, if you give your body that, it's going to make pretty much dysfunctional cells.
Right.
Your mitochondria is not going to be as successful, but if you give yourself healthy fats, then, you can, I think that you can thrive. And that's why, there's a lot of different moving pieces, man, and it's like everybody is like, going to be a little different based on, like their genetics or like, and the thing is though, when I say paleo diet, and a lot of people, they think there's one paleo diet, but it's not true. There's a doctor, Dr. Michael Ruscio. I'm a podcast junkie. Okay. I've learned a lot of stuff from podcasts. Okay?
As we are.
Okay.
and so there's a lot of podcasts that I've listened to over the last few years that I've gotten some different information from. He has a podcast called Dr. Ruscio Radio, and he brought up a point in like the paleo diet. The thing is that there's several different paleo diets throughout history. Okay, and they find that it's equatorial in nature. So like if you're an Ecuadorian, you might work better. And then when we're talking not where you live right now, but like your genetic
makeup.
Profile. Yeah, your genetic, basis, like, your ancestral DNA,
right.
That sort of thing, through, evolutionarily biology. So, if you're, your ancestors grew up around like, the equator, a high carb, low fat diet might be more beneficial for you. But then, and that's like, 0 to 30 degrees longitude,
right.
But if you, 30 to 40, you're in that, Mediterranean area of the equator. So, like that's more of like, a mid-range, where it's like, equal parts high fat, or fat and carbohydrates. But plus 40 degrees, then it's, if you're like in Ireland, you're genetically speaking, you probably work better on a high fat, low carbohydrate diet. So there's not like, everybody touts like, or a lot of people say, oh, the Mediterranean diet, everybody, well, we're not all Mediterranean.
Right.
We're not, if you look at, this is where like another reason why the personalized nutrition is coming in, because we're starting to be able to look at the genetic markers, whether it's a 23andMe or you do your ancestry.com data, or whatever, any kind of like, you can get some genetic markers nowadays for a pretty darn low price. And
but then you're in the system, and then they can.
Then they've got you. They've got you by your little DNAs. Yeah.
Hey, if you're on Facebook, you're in the system. All right.
That's true enough. But Facebook doesn't have my DNA yet.
Are you sure?
No, that's actually true. They've probably contracted with the trash company to come pick up my old stuff and log all that.
They're swabbing your little cans of Dr. Pepper.
It's all indexed. No, that's Google's doing that.
Yeah.
Selling it to Facebook.
So
well,
I don't know.
That's all by the
yeah.
Illuminati, anyways.
Chip, I can tell that we could talk to you for 20 minutes more. I just saw a flash. Are we still connected?
Yeah,
we're good.
connected.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I think we could talk to you for another like 4 hours.
Well, yeah.
I think that would be easy.
Yeah, I think so too. If you want to, I'm good.
Nice. Well, today I think we're going to have to start wrapping it up here today. But I think we're going to have you on again at some point because I think I'd like to talk to you.
Scratch the surface. We just
yeah.
begun to
Yeah,
scratch.
I mean, it is kind of scratching the surface. I mean, this is kind of like the beginnings of it, but I don't know. Like, I guess to wrap up, I think one of the biggest things that you could do, or that, I mean, I don't know. One of the biggest thing.
Are you about to give us advice? Because I was about to ask you for advice.
Okay, what's your advice? Ask me, and I'll
what would you recommend for Bill and I? That's advice. Give us some advice.
If you could wrap up your like a 5-minute pitch, like within 5 minutes, what's the most useful advice you could give us?
Give me a 30-second pitch. Give me a 2-minute, whatever. Give me just throw me something.
Okay.
Give me something.
Start with the small stuff. If you drink a lot of soda, cut it out, man.
I'm doing good with that stuff. I'm cutting the soda.
One thing I can help is getting LaCroix. Just like the.
That's too fancy for me.
Yeah,
it's LaCroix.
There's also a company called Zevia.
They make good soda.
Yeah, and it's non-GMO, and then they sweeten their soda. There's no added colors, no preservatives, and it's stevia sweetened.
I've been drinking a lot of kombucha.
Yeah, kombucha was great. That was really good. There's some people might be histamine sensitive though, so those fermented foods and kombucha you might have an adverse reaction to it if you use it too much, but it's still really good for you, especially when you're trying to get off the soda and you crave that carbohydrate or that fizzy water.
Yeah.
So so there's that. But small stuff, do that, move more, get up. One of the things I did was I didn't jump right into exercise, doing a lot of heavy exercise. I just put on a backpack and went out to my local state park, and I packed a lunch and I went hiking, and that's all I did. I'd go hiking for a couple hours. Just doing the exercise that you love to do is the one that you're going to stick with, I think.
Hiking for 2 hours is not baby steps.
But it's low impact.
It is.
No, it's not for us.
No.
Okay, well, 30 minutes.
I'm kidding.
30
minutes of standing with our arms straight out.
Go to Kennesaw Mountain.
Go to
Kennesaw Mountain and just hike up. I mean, that's a good workout right there. If you did that.
Yeah, we used to love doing that, and we haven't done that in years. So it's been a minute.
Yeah. So, eat real food, eat whole foods, eat stuff that's not in a package. Get all the stuff that's in your house that is I mean, there's nuance to it though, as well, I can't, most people are probably not going to ferment their own, kefir, or they're not going to, go
we got some
and
kombucha
make their own
in the closet right now.
I've got a kombucha. Yeah, I make my own kombucha now, and I'm gonna get a cup of bone broth here after we're done. But I buy yogurt, whole milk, whole fat, organic yogurt.
Which is hard to find. It makes me upset that I cannot find full fat Aldi. I'll have to try Aldi.
Aldi is they have got a lot of. If you're on a budget, Aldi is one of the best places to find, some good stuff. So, but then, just eat real whole food, and I think a lot of the big barrier for a lot of people is that it's eating whole foods. We've kind of been conditioned to think that we need to stop and buy fast food when we're hungry. Learn how to cook. One thing that is good for, I think, people who aren't familiar with cooking a whole lot is a service like Blue Apron.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good idea.
You can get that, and you can kind of base. They're sending you the food if you can afford it. That is, but they're sending you the food. They're sending the recipes. They're showing you how to make it, and a lot of times within the the recipe, they'll say use olive oil or use, you can use MCT oil or coconut oil, avocado oil, whatever your preference of a good, healthy cooking fat is. But then also, like, I think the last bit of advice is don't be afraid to go hungry. Fasting has become doing some fasting was like intermittent fasting. Our bodies are flexible. Metabolically, part of the whole journey has been that I've realized is becoming metabolically flexible.
Yeah.
To where I'm able to dip into these different energy stores that my body has, whether it be glucose, fat, or ketones. And and this is like it's kind of some next level stuff, but
no, but fasting's been something that I've been fascinated with in the past, and I'm glad you brought it up because I've kind of forgot about it. That may be something interesting to look into.
Yeah, I'd recommend a book by Dr. Jason Fung, and it's called The Complete Guide to Fasting. I believe he wrote it with Jimmy Moore, who is he does like a podcast called Living La Vida Low Carb. Dr. Jason Fung was one of the first guys that I found that was like when I first started that just like it. I mean, our hunter-gatherer ancestors went long periods of time without food, and they were able to do it because every pound of fat that you have on your body, that's a meal. Insulin is a hormone that it's a fat storage hormone. So just doing stuff like that, just giving yourself a protracted amount of time to where your body can actually process and go through a process of autophagy as well, where there's some cell death that occurs. The bad cells will die and new ones will arise, and when you can and that's another thing where it's like kind of small steps. Give yourself a good, especially if you're a sugar burner and you're carb dependent, and that's like it took me a while to get to the point where I could go like a solid 5 hours in between meals,
Yeah.
I was like, just 5 hours without eating anything was a struggle.
What?
But now,
Go ahead.
back in November, I did a 5-day fast where the only thing that I consumed was bone broth, green tea, and coffee, bulletproof coffee. It's kind of a fat fast, but you can, that stuff doesn't spike your insulin because
Right.
it doesn't, So like you're getting 80 to 90% of the benefit of a full fast. Water fast is hard, man. I've did that for 24 hours. That just doing a straight water fast was very difficult. But, if you are feeling like peckish, if you're trying to extend your feeding, the time in which you're feeding, just even, drink a glass of water. Because sometimes we confuse hunger with thirst.
Right.
I think we're gonna have to bring you back for the fasting special episode where Bill and I fast.
It'll be the crankiest episode ever.
Yeah, it'll be a pile. It'll be yeah.
Anything you want to plug while you're on the air?
Yeah, where can people find you, dude?
If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm on Twitter at Chip Copeland. You could, I guess, look me up on Instagram if you want to. Same thing, Chip Copeland. I do a podcast, a goofy music podcast with some guys called Sock Monkey Sound. And we just pick apart musical genres or topics and make fun of each other. And
I hear it's pretty good, so I have it on good authority that it's good.
Well, hopefully, I don't know, but you guys, I don't have anything else other than that. I post a lot of, or will tweet out or post a lot of things that I find interesting, in the whether it be an article on diet or mindfulness or minimalism or whatever I'm kind of interested at the time.
Right.
Music, occasionally you'll see. I don't do selfies very often, so sorry.
Do you, for your Instagrams, just pictures of articles? You just said, this article I'm reading, it's great. I'm reading it on my phone, so I actually had to get another phone to take a picture of this. It's like pictures of you reading.
Sometimes my kids. I'm not like overly active on posting things on Instagram.
Right.
I yeah, it's just like I'm not that narcissistic enough to really think that people, want
Not trying hard enough.
Yeah, you gotta be way more narcissistic to do that.
Man, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a Kardashian, so I don't know.
All right, man. Hey, well, it's been super awesome talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem.
All right,
let's go hike.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be great.
We'll meet halfway.
Yeah.
What is that? Is that
like Kansas or something?
Yeah, we'll meet in Kansas.
Man, that was like one of my goals. Like I was like sitting there watching Bear Grylls, and I'm like, man, I want to do that. And I texted our friend Patrick. And, and I was like, hey, you want to do the Appalachian Trail? It's like. Right. He's like, yeah, and that's still like kind of like a bucket list thing. So
yeah, I still wouldn't mind doing it. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll take care, man. You have a good one. Okay.
All righty. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye. All righty. So we actually do have to do some updates really quickly.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Updates. So weekly update, real quick. Hey, Bill, how was your week? How was your food week?
It was all right. It was all right. It wasn't great. I ate a lot of rice this week.
Chip just said don't do that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to Chip before I made my diet this week.
Okay.
Lots of exercise.
Nice.
But since I did cheat,
I have a dog locked in here. He's going insane, so that's just going to be in the recording. So.
But yeah, I stayed the same this week.
Yeah.
Didn't lose. Didn't gain. It was all right.
Okay. Cool. I lost 1 pound.
Good job.
I ate a cheeseburger yesterday, Bill.
How was it?
It wasn't that delicious.
It's funny how your taste changed, isn't it?
Yeah, it was super disappointing. I'd reserved the right to have like 2 cheeseburgers a week or whatever the hell it was in the diet when I started, and I hadn't had anything. Well, I'd had plenty, but I hadn't had a cheeseburger.
Solid meat meal.
Yeah, so I went to the place that has my favorite cheeseburger around here, and they're really good. And I went and I got it, and I bit into it, and I was like, this doesn't taste amazing. This tastes kind of weird.
Yeah.
And it's not gross, but it's not delicious like I was expecting. So it's kind of disappointing. And I only lost 1 pound, but I did lose 1 pound, so I'm excited about that. I'm now at 313 this morning.
I think I mentioned last week about that flipping that switch where I wasn't craving sugar at all anymore.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that got flipped back.
Did it get flipped back?
Yeah, it got flipped. Yeah, definitely.
So now you're craving sugar
Oh,
again.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been craving meat.
Yeah.
I've been craving meat like crazy, which is why I was like, let me just go eat meat then. And I got the meat meal, the meatastic meal I could think of. It was a cheeseburger with 5 hot wings.
Oh my God. They have good hot wings too.
Yeah, there's delicious hot wings. Big basket of French fries. And I was like, well, if I'm going to murder myself, let's do it right. And I got a Dr. Pepper, and I drank the whole thing, and I ate the whole thing. And I was like, I feel rough after that. Yeah, and like my stomach hurt all night. And the burger wasn't that delicious.
That's the sad part.
Super disappointing.
It's not even worth it.
No, it's like really kind of bummed me out. Anyway, that's it. I lost 1 pound. Yay. I'm hoping that was a second last hurrah.
Yeah. It's probably your diabetes kicking in.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things. Like, I'm seriously thinking about like starting to work on sugar now and starting to cut that out. And I guess that was in my mind why I said it was okay to have a burger. Yeah. Because I'm about to like escalate this diet thing. So I don't know why it's okay to go backwards when you're about to go forward further. Why you're like, I'm going to go this way. So it's fine if I just go back home real quick.
Make my journey harder when I
make it longer.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a weird psychology. But anyway, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Bill, for sitting down and talking with me today.
Thank you, Chip, for joining us.
Thank you, Chip.
Fantastic.
Chip Copeland. That was fantastic. That was really great. That's our first
very
guest.
good
We'll probably have guests more often, I would assume.
I would hope so.
I hope so. I'm not interviewing my dog, although he's definitely on this podcast.
He's very interested in saying some stuff.
All right. Take care. Have a beautiful week, everybody. Talk to you next week.
Love y'all.
And goodbye.
Bye.